So I'd like to introduce Jeanine Bassett from General Mills. And I also, because we have so many speakers, I'm not going to say anything about them because you can read their bios. But I would ask you, when you come up here, would you tell the audience, please, the one thing that they really need to know about you? Okay? Jeanine from General Mills.
Okay, well, one thing you need to know about me, I guess, is I'm the mother of 3 teenage boys. So I know everything there is to know about mobile because they stopped talking to me years ago. So anyway, my name is Jeanine Bassett, and I oversee global consumer insights for General Mills. And welcome to our backyard. For those of you who don't know it, General Mills world headquarters is 2 blocks that way. So we are sitting in the shadow of General Mills. And I'm a native Minneapolitan, so welcome to my hometown. Today, let's see, which am I going to click? Over here? No? Over here? Where should I point the deal to get some... There we are, yay. All right. Very good. It's never me, it's always. So anyway, what I'm here to tell you about today is at least one company story about our journey from mobile as a twinkle in our eye to where we have fully embraced it. And I'll talk about what that tipping point was for us, and then a lot of those forks in the road and those big strategic issues in terms of where we're going to go big or where we're going to go small. I'll talk about the organizational change that we put in place to enable this exploration. And I'll end with a challenge to the industry on mobile, because the more you know, the more you want. So we'll end with that. But the prevailing theme of my talk is, we're all in. Come on in, the water's warm. And so if you're on the verge and on the ledge, hopefully this will convince you that mobile's the way to go. All right. Mobile is complicated. It is deceptively simple. There is a lot to it. And as we finally got our arms wrapped around it and our minds wrapped around it, we thought we're not going to be able to take this on in one big chunk. So we broke it down to many different phases across many different questions. So I'll walk you through all of that. It all started with that sinking feeling in about 2010, and that was really the tipping point for us. I've been at the Mills for 19 years, but in 2010 I moved to a central part of our organization called the CLE, which is the Center for Learning and Experimentation. That is the most forward-leaning part of our function. They're on the hook for scanning the environment for emerging consumer trends and methods and kind of looking out for where market research is going, envisioning that on behalf of our function and making sure that we have a plan to get there. So when I got there, we didn't have a long-range plan in place, so one of the first things we wanted to do was to put one in place. And that kicked off with a review of the trends that were going on with consumers and our environment. And so we kicked it off with the sexy stuff back in 2010, which was things like neuroscience and gamification and the river. Can I just say context is everything? Where else is that the sexy stuff? And so we started talking about those things, but then our data management and data quality group stood up and said, what you all need to know is that email usage was down more than 20% last year. And that gave us collective whiplash. First off, it caught us by surprise. It's like, what happened to 2, 5, 10%? How did you get to 20? But it was 20%. The other issue is we have an in-house market research agency. We execute a lot of our own research, and a lot of that is quantitative. So this wasn't a partner issue. This wasn't a vendor issue. This was very much our issue. And we spent 0 time debating how much faster that number was going to drop. It didn't matter if it was going to go like this or this. The point was it wasn't coming back. And so at some point, the way we do research was going to become obsolete. We had to look that in the eye and figure out what are we going to do about this. Now, mobile was another trend that we talked about, and that was about the rapid conversion from cell phones to smartphones. And those 2 trends were bumping up against each other because texting was replacing email as a way for consumers to communicate, and the mobile phone was replacing the computer as a way to access the internet. So we knew mobile was going to be part of the solution. Mobile was not new to General Mills. Marketing had long embraced mobile as a consumer touch point, so it was a device, obviously, that was in our wheelhouse, but we hadn't thought about it as a market research device. How could something so small and so trite hope to approximate our sophisticated, strategic, and let's face it, unwieldy surveys? And so it had never really dawned on us that it could do anything but the small and tactical. And so we paused and we said, we have to look at this differently. We have to think about it differently. So we thought about it in two different ways. We thought about it, well, there's a whole bundle of reasons we kind of have to do it. So there is the stick. There's a whole bunch of reasons we want to do it. So those are the carrots. And so we examined both parts of that equation. So we'll start with, why do we feel like we have to do this? So part of it is just sample compositions. You know, one of the issues we were sure we were going to come into and come out of our long-range plan was that our sample panels underrepresented key growth targets like Hispanics and African Americans, and we were frustrated at the lack of progress in the industry against that because we had to succeed with those growth targets. And so that was a big issue, and one of the other facts that we picked up on in 2010 was that Hispanics were over-indexing the rest of the population in terms of accessing the internet through the mobile phone. It's like, okay, that's a really good reason to consider that. The second reason, as I mentioned, we commissioned a lot of our own research, and we noticed that more and more our surveys that were designed for big old computer screens were being accessed by people with itty-bitty little smartphones. Our concepts weren't meant to be viewed that way. Our big grids weren't meant to be viewed that way, and so we were screening them out. At that time, it was about 5%. When you screen out, you introduce a bias. So it's like, okay, this is not going to be okay. That number is now up to 30%. Because even though we've made a lot of progress on mobile, not all of our surveys are yet device agnostic. And so we still have folks trying to enter surveys that are intended for big screens and mice and all those other things on the mobile phone. So this is an issue that is not within the realm of possibility to continue to ignore that. Additionally, how do millennials communicate? How are consumers communicating with each other in their world? And that was on the move. They were moving away from email. They had long moved away from mail. And this came home for me when my oldest son went off to college last year. One of his first texts back to me was, "Where does the stamp go on the envelope?" It's like, what? I have not prepared this child for life. So I took a picture of an envelope, sent it back to him with a text, and got it. I didn't even talk it through him and send him a photo. So those days are over. And, clearly they're over here. They're texting, we're emailing, and this is what we want to do. We don't want to have consumers have to break from the rhythm of their data answer survey. We want to integrate into the way consumers live their lives. And so, again, it was like we need to get ourselves out of the home office and into the consumer's pocket. So those are the reasons we have to do it, but there's a lot of reasons we want to do it. And one of those reasons gets back to sample, and it is global. Now, we're a global company. I know many of you have global companies. And as you think about how do we get into those emergent markets, panel actually is not the first issue. The first issue is hardware. And many of these emergent markets, they don't even have the computers, let alone do we have the sample. And mobile penetration well exceeds computers. So clearly, this is going to be a way into the brick markets and other emergent markets as we all look for new volume opportunities around the world. Second, this little guy can do it all. We do a lot of in-store research, and we used to come loaded down. Man, we had video cameras and microphones, and we had all that. And we were in the store aisle. It was disruptive, and it was a production. It was very laboratory-like. And you can do all that on the mobile phone and more. We don't even have to be present in the aisle anymore. And we love that more and more of our research responses are coming in through ways other than writing and quantitative, because there is so much insight to be had in the emotion of a voice. You can hear the exasperation. You can see the smile on their face. And so there's so much more insight in these new media that this provides us with. So we love it for that. And when we had 3 different devices, there was a big job on the back end to pull it back all together, make sure it all went with that respondent. And when it's on the phone, it's already collected for you. So there's a great deal of efficiency built into the mobile phone as well. So for a company that did a lot of work with a lot of different devices, this was a huge leap forward for us. We love that the computer is in your pocket. The holy grail for any researchers is to get as close to that moment of truth, that consumer moment of truth, as possible. The more space between your question and the moment of truth, the more guessing you're going to get. My experience is the more rational the answer is going to be. It's not going to capture the emotion of the moment that they reached for that product or they cooked whatever it was that they're cooking. So it addresses this nasty recall problem. So instead of asking the last time you shopped for cereals, why did you buy Cheerios? Instead, we can ask them while they're in the aisle, in the moment, why are you buying Cheerios? Or I just noticed that, we help them scan everything they buy and put in their cart. I noticed you just put yours in your cart. Why is that? And so it really closed the gap on what they would say a week later, which is, well, I always buy it, or it was on sale. That may not be the reason at all. So we're much closer to the real why, the real reason, the real insight. Or thinking of the last time you ate cereals, how much did you like or dislike it? And the more space you have between that, the more aggregated that number gets to be. It wasn't that experience. It was overall, I give Cheerios a 7 on a 9-point liking scale. I want to know how much you liked it today, right now. And so now we can say, while you're eating it, how much do you like it? And we've done a lot of work here, and I will tell you those liking scores are very different. And we'll talk later in the presentation is how do we feel about that? Is that a good thing? Is that a bad thing? Because they're different, and how do you recalibrate how you think about it? All right. It helps take us from simulated to reality. Anytime you can get out of the laboratory, that's a good thing. Anytime you do not create an aura of you're on, the better off we're at. And again, the greatest example of this is an in-store example. We often, as we come out with a new product, particularly in a category we're not currently in, like where would you shelve this product? And has anybody ever done virtual store testing? That is a lot of work and really expensive. And you have to have pictures, JPEGs of all the products. And for us, the cereal category, very complicated. More than once, it's like, okay, I need the Kix box without the Spider-Man promotion. I mean, it's just hard to keep up with that. And then you're locked into that shelf placement. Actually, that shelf set is nobody's shelf set. It isn't anybody's shelf set. So it doesn't reflect that consumer's reality. So we love the fact that they take their phone into their store, take a picture of their shelf in a context they know, and then place it. It's especially handy when you're coming for something where you don't know where the consumer might look for it. And maybe 20% will say the deli, and 30% will say cereal, and 50% will say over here. So that allows you to be surprised, not presumptuous, as you need to be with simulated research. And there's always insight in being surprised. So we like the surprise element that mobile brings to it as well. All right. So those are some carrots, those are some sticks. So this is one of the big issues, the big questions we wrestled with. Is mobile going to be just another way into research, or is it going to be the way we do research? Much of our research is compartmentalized. We use marketing mix to do this. We use ethnographies to do this. We use this to do this. But is it like one of those things, or is it like Internet, which was a research platform where you move many different methods to a platform? And we landed on it is going to be the way in. It will not be good for this or that. It will be good for lots of things. And as I walk you through our very specific journey, you'll see how we landed there. Well, that gave us flashbacks to the internet conversion. And I don't know who else was around for the internet conversion, but that was late 1990s and early 2000s. And that was a major deal. And that was where we moved from mall intercept and mail panels to the internet. And it was an interesting conversion because we assumed that mail and mall represented the truth. And internet was this necessary thing we need to move to. There were benefits to it, but the truth was over here. So the conversion strategy was to take studies we'd already done in mail and mall and duplicate them with an internet front end. And then look at the differences and calibrate so that you didn't have to revisit your benchmarks. So there are two reasons for that. Number one, here's the truth. How do we get this back to the truth? And the second one's cultural, right? We've gotten used to those benchmarks. We trained marketing. We trained ourselves. We know that a 29 trial score means launch, and a 2-point liking scale means go back to the drawing board. And so that represented a huge cultural challenge. And to what degree do you want to take that on? And what I would say in this one is what we wanted to do, what we have done here is as we have looked at the new numbers and that sort of thing, this is not a recalibration exercise. We are not assuming that what we know today is the truth and where we're going is somewhere different. We think there's actually truth in both. And so it is going to be a very different conversion. Clicking. One more click. Here we go. So when you see differences, be curious. Don't assume one is right and one is wrong, because just because you are answering with a different platform means the answer will be different. It will be contextual. So it isn't about which one's right or wrong. It's just about which one says something different about your information. So that's a very different way of thinking about it. All right, so this ain't no lift and shift, okay? So if you're thinking about, can I take the methods I know and love, that I've invested a lot of time in thinking about, and just apply a new front end to it, it's not going to work that way. And that was a cold splash of water for us, because that was going to be a pretty easy path. We are in the process of reimagining how we do research, reimagining how you do volume estimation, reimagining how you do an ANU. So start with, because it's been a long time since we started with, what's the job that research was supposed to do? Now, how do we get there in a new way? And how do we leverage the power of mobile and make it even better? So that was a big mind shift for us as well. And it made the job a whole lot harder, actually. All right, so how did we go after this organizationally? Like for real, who did it and what did they do? So 2 years ago, we put a team together. Okay, we put a guy together. We pulled Andy Divvig out of our analytics group because we wanted somebody who knew methods stone cold, upside down and backwards. And Andy will be speaking later in the conference, and made him our global mobile manager. And so he was the team. But we wanted to start small and justify getting big because, again, we didn't know. Is it the way in or a way in? If it's a way in, it's probably an in and out kind of deal. So we started that in 2011. And Andy bricked it out, and he says, okay, our first job is to get smart, because we had a lot of assumptions about what mobile could and could not do. Let's go find out what's going on in the industry, because we hadn't really been tuned in. So the very first thing he did was attend this conference in Atlanta. So he's getting his fingertips, he's learning who are the players, what's the landscape, who else is trying to figure this out. And so he went to a lot of different conferences and talked to a lot of different vendors, and in fact, in a year, assessed over 80 vendors. So that's a lot of landscape to cover. And what we discovered is they basically fell on two different axes. Either they were great at research and learned to incorporate mobile, or they were technology startups. And they had very different focus areas. And if you want to plug and play and get going, you should work with those who have got the intersection of research and technology. But we found that technology startups tended to be more creative and looked at what the mobile device could do and was leveraging that to answer questions we could not answer before. And for us, that was the real promise of mobile. It wasn't to make existing research better, although it will do that, but it allows us to answer questions previously we could not answer via research. Either we had to intuit our way there, or we'll get 20% there. And so that was a huge exercise. It really helped us understand where to go. Because as I said, we're an in-house market research agency, so we have a lot of research know-how. But if you're working with a technology company, you have to know you're going to commit some time and resources to get there together, because there's a little bit of a gap. So that's something to think about. And then we did 30 live projects. So this is very different from the internet conversion, which was taking stuff we used to do and then redo it with mobile. Because the way we operate at General Mills is our business partners in the divisions, like Big G and Yoplait and Hamburger Helper and all that, they would come to us on projects and say, what's your best rec on how to do this? Especially for things that aren't turnkey. And we used that same construct for mobile. So as they came to us with business questions, instead of saying, do it the same old way, how's about you pilot with this new mobile vendor, and we'll hold your hand through it. Clearly, we were doing it on high-risk projects, but where they want to try something new, it's a little bit out of the ordinary, we did it. One of the reasons we did it that way is we wanted to see what mobile could do. We wanted to kick the tires. We didn't want to answer the same old questions. The other reason this was really important is we had to get the organization to come along for the ride. This had to be a pull strategy. So anybody who works in organizations where you're trying to introduce a new method and get everybody to embrace it, it works a whole lot better when they're pulling along with you. And so that was part of it. And our culture is just innovative, and people like to do it anyway. So that all worked really great. And I will tell you, we kissed a lot of frogs. Some of them were just frogs. But some ended up being princes, and that's just part of the game, if you will. So that was year one. Year two, we started to bulk up the team, so it was 80 plus, because we knew we were going to go all in. So we had scoured the universe and talked to many different vendors, and it was time to narrow a little bit to some strategic partners, particularly if you're working with a technological organization, because now you're going to need some shared objectives. You're going to need to figure out how you're going to work together. Is there on-site support? And all that good stuff. And so Andy picked a couple of partners, and we've been working with them very closely. Number 3 is we completed 100 different projects. So some of them have now become status quo. From the live pilots in 2011, it's like, this is the new way to do that. So now we're on, so that's now status quo, and our divisions are used to doing that. The balance was still, let's figure out what mobile can do. The second bullet was about how far can we push mobile? Is it truly the tactical and small, or can it be the strategic and big? And we got to the strategic and big. I was blown away, really, by the kinds of business questions that we could answer with mobile and do it even better than the way we had done it before. And that's what has really given us the conviction to go big. Otherwise, it was destined to become compartmentalized research. So 2012 was a breakthrough year in terms of tapping into and realizing the potential of mobile. Here we are in 2013. This is our transformational year. Annie has been busy consulting with all our divisions as they put their research plans together for the year to mobilize those plans. Because as we've done lots of pilots, some divisions have been more exposed to others, and you looked through those plans and looked at what can be done with mobile. Yeah, no, maybe, not yet. So to the degree to which we can go, we're going. And so the balance is really in transforming the old, because some of those, not sure. So we haven't gotten to our full methodological toolkit. There are a couple of big kahunas. It's like, we'll save that for last. So those are the ones we're looking at now, and they may be able to be done in mobile, and maybe not. That's okay. It's not intended to do everything. So that's 2013. And with all of that behind us, we know the players. We've got our methodological roadmap in place. We are already in the phase of thinking about sunsetting that team and moving on to the next big thing. And so that's kind of where we're at in our journey. Our commitment and our vision is to get to 80% of all research done on mobile by next calendar 2014, and we are well on our way. And when you say, well, what kinds of research? We're not talking things about like syndicated, stuff like that. That's not going to happen. But in the normal world of commissioned research, qual and quant, this is our goal. We feel very good about our ability to get there. Now, let's talk about our challenges to the industry, because the more we know, the more gaps we see, the more opportunity we see. And so as more folks get on board, these are the kinds of things we'd like to be all working on together. So number one is panels. Isn't that always the issue? It doesn't matter what you're working on, it's always going to be the issue. And we just need more panels for mobile. They need to be more representative, more global. We just need more. And as more people move into the mobile world, we need to make sure those things are in place so people can do studies in mobile. This is a tricky one. The thing we love about mobile is we can get so much new media in terms of pictures and videos and lots of qual, but we don't have a lot of choice in terms of tools to just plow through that data and give us back the insights. It's great to get 300 pictures. It's not so great if you can't do anything with them other than pull them out and use them in a PowerPoint slide and say, look at our cool stuff. What you want to be able to do is comb through that and find the insights. We need facial coding recognition. We need the sentiment analysis we do on text. We have to be able to do it on videos. So those are the kinds of tools that we need to plow through that. There's a little bit of a gap in the industry as far as that is concerned. This is a tricky one, too. We need short, mobile-friendly methods to approximate long methods. You can't do a 40-minute A&U on the mobile phone. They don't have the patience for that. And, we dipped our toe in the water on that one this year. We took a historically long survey, and we did a smaller part of it. So we've entered the world of fragmented surveys, and this is tricky, because now you've got partials, and how do you knit it all together? But what's interesting is it tipped us into the world of big data, because we realized that as we looked at that enormous survey is we were asking some questions we already knew the answer to. We were just too lazy to connect it back up. It was easier to ask it all over again and have it in the same record. And so having a fragmented survey is making us much smarter about efficiently use all the information you already have. And so in this particular study, we had consumers scan the UPC of what they were consuming, record how much they liked it, and on and on. We were able to connect that to other databases in our company that had UPC codes, like a nutrition database, a sensory database, a sales database. Like, wow, who knew? And so we may not have gotten there without the mother of necessity, right? And so this has pushed us into the world of big data because you won't be able to do those long surveys. They will be smaller, and how do you knit those pieces back together when they're not all sitting in the same survey? So, but we do need more help on that, and it is really a convergence of both mobile and big data, and I think those two will work together. All right. Creative application of mobile tools for new methods. I mean, the real power in mobile is to do things we haven't done before. And it has so many tricks on it, and it's constantly evolving, not just the iPhone, the Android, anything you have. And so how do you get the most out of what mobile has to offer? All right, so that's our story in terms of where we've gone, where we're at, where we've arrived, and how we've got there. And my invitation to you is come on in. The water's warm. And so at this point, I'm ready to take questions from the audience, or if anybody's been entering them into the system. And I will say Andy Divvig is also presenting later on in the conference. And so if it's too gnarly of a question, I'm going to say, wait for Andy. So I got an out cause right in the agenda. Yep, question back here.
Job. Yeah. Just a quick question. In terms of how you actually conducted your research, did you do it predominantly through an app, or did you send the respondent a link, or?
Primarily not through apps. It would be links, and that's a. We had a lot of discussions with our legal department, right? Because you want to keep this stuff in a secure space. And so, Andy could speak to it. I see Jen's out there. She could speak to somebody out there. She could speak to it. But we have not developed apps per se. The mobile is an entry device into the internet.
And just another bolt-on question, I went hog. How many countries did you cover your pilots off, or was it just predominantly the US?
No, the live pilots were in at least 6 other countries outside the United States. And that was in the year 1, and I don't know how many we've added since then.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Any other questions? Yeah, right here in the front row.
Yeah, what are some of the bigger business issues that you resolved? Was it new product development? Was it advertising? What were you actually, you mentioned the breakthrough was the big stuff. You said the tactical. Could you give us an example?
I would say, it has been most helpful in places where recall was creating a false sense of security for us, where we thought that was the truth. And so the breakthrough for us was getting more precision and more truth by getting closer to in the moment. Like the liking scores on products has been shocking. They've been higher than they were without mobile. And it has to do with consumer behaviors about accessing what's already in their home, if you will. But that has been the biggest surprise, and I think the biggest leap forward. I would not say it has advanced, advertising per se or product per se, but it's made everything a little bit better, I think is the best way to say it.
For who?
For us as market researchers, in terms of getting answers that are more closely predictive of what will actually happen in the market, where consumers aren't guessing what will happen or recalling what they think happened, which puts you on pretty shaky ground. But the closer you are to picking up actual behaviors, we find that it has been more predictive. What we see in market is more what we heard in the research.
Have you solved the issue of taking a large survey and breaking it down into smaller ones? What has been your learning?
Those would be the big kahunas we haven't gotten to yet. So we have saved the best for last, if you will. And I would say, but the other thing is really about reimagining the research and say, did they really need to be that big to begin with? And if they do, then that's a different conversation. And if they don't, then this is just the right aperture to have that conversation. Sometimes you have to be forced to have the conversation and forced to relook at how you're doing research. And in a lot of cases, we were asking more than we ever needed to because we got lazy, right? You've already invested the money. You're thrown in the kitchen sink. Why wouldn't you ask all these questions? This question, yeah.
Sorry, there's somebody with a microphone here with a question. Let me just start.
Okay, how about you be the question spotter?
I had the microphone, sorry. I want to know, have you noticed a difference in responses to research based on devices like an iPad versus a mobile? Other than immediate recall, have you noticed a difference between computer, iPad, mobile device?
Yes, we have found response rates to be much higher. They're opting into a mobile panel. It's more fun to take research on a mobile device. And so, yes, but the short answer is yes. We have found response rates are higher. And the completion rates are higher. Probably it may not be the device, but the fact that they're shorter. So that's kind of all tangled together. Yeah?
I wanted to ask a dollars and cents question.
Yeah.
How did your cost justify this? How did you, you said you started small. One person can't get much smaller than that. I suppose you could. But and how much of your budget got applied this way versus traditional research?
So the answer to the first question was around how did you resource it? It was reallocation of resources within our construct. So when I say we're going to sunset the mobile team, that's because we're going to repurpose them for something else. And so the resources from the mobile team came from different parts of our organization that were also sunsetting. So it was a zero resource strategy. And then the second question was?
How much did you spend?
Yes, the dollars spent. And so again, that is zero sum because it was going to cost more, forget it. But we have not found on the whole that mobile is a lot cheaper. So if the objective is cheaper research, we haven't necessarily found that to be the case. And it may be with anything that's new that over time it does get less expensive. But at first blush, that hasn't been our experience. So in terms of faster, better, cheaper, better for sure. And when the gentleman was asking me what's better, it's like everything's better. And in a lot of cases, it's faster as well. Certainly, it's easier to modify a research question on a mobile phone than it is in other ways.
And is that more expensive?
It could be in some methods, and then we talk about is the benefit material enough to move. So it has to be better. It certainly can't be worse. So it has to be better in some element.
Dan Foreman, Lumi Mobile. What's the balance between you driving this and agencies being proactive?
Little bit of both. I mean, we are, Andy and his team is driving hard because they have what they want really clearly defined, and that makes it easier. But vendors are calling all the time. Everybody's calling all the time. So there's plenty of push, and there's certainly plenty of pull. I think some things we need bigger, faster, better than the industry can move on, particularly panel. But the push has been slower in other areas. I don't think it's quite as mature as it is in other areas, and so that's why we kind of created our call to action. I saw something else around here. Yeah? One more? Oh, okay. I didn't see any hands. That's okay.
You'll be at the break.
Yeah.
People can buttonhole her at the break. Thank you so much.